Why is it possible that Africa, the richest continent in natural resources, is also one of the poorest? Join me on this journey to uncover the reasons behind this contradiction. Africa's wealth. Africa is immensely rich in natural resources, from vast deposits of diamonds, gold, oil, and natural gas to fertile lands and incredible biodiversity. The continent's potential is staggering. Imagine this: 30% of the world's mineral resources are found in Africa. For example, the Democratic Republic of Congo holds some of the largest global reserves of cobalt and coltan, essential for manufacturing electronic devices. Nigeria is one of the largest oil producers globally, and South Africa is renowned for its gold and platinum mines. Additionally, Africa contains 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land, giving it massive agricultural potential. Its biodiversity is astonishing, with unique species of flora and fauna that cannot be found anywhere else on the planet. However, despite this abundance, poverty remains a daily reality for millions of Africans. This leads us to the inevitable question: why are most African countries still struggling with extreme poverty despite their natural wealth? To understand why Africa's natural resources do not translate into widespread prosperity, we need to consider several interconnected factors. A history of colonial exploitation. To understand Africa's current situation, we must go back to the dark era of European colonialism, and even earlier to the moment Europe began expanding its horizons, the discovery of America in 1492. This event marked the beginning of an era of exploration and conquest for European powers, who not only focused on the Americas but also turned their attention to Africa. Picture this: a vast continent rich in resources that European powers saw as a literal gold mine. From the late 15th century onward, Africa became Europe's chessboard. Countries like Portugal, Spain, Great Britain, France, Belgium, and Germany divided the continent at will, disregarding existing cultures, ethnic groups, or natural borders. The transatlantic slave trade, which began in the 16th century, was one of the earliest and most devastating forms of European exploitation in Africa. Millions of Africans were captured and sent to the Americas to work on plantations under inhumane conditions. This trade not only robbed Africa of a significant portion of its young, working population, but also destabilized local societies and economies. For centuries, colonial powers exploited African resources for their own benefit. Europeans extracted gold, diamonds, rubber, oil, and many other riches, taking them to their own lands and leaving Africans empty-handed. It wasn't just resource extraction, it was systematic plundering. Rubber from Congo, diamonds from South Africa, gold from Ghana, all were taken with little regard for the people who lived there. Colonialism also imposed an economic system that benefited only the colonizers. The best lands were reserved for export plantations, while Africans were relegated to less fertile areas. This systematic exploitation not only plundered natural wealth, but also left a legacy of insufficient infrastructure and lack of industrial development. For example, railways were built solely to transport resources from the interior to export ports, with no thought for the internal development of the countries. Independence in the 1960s brought an end to colonial rule, but African nations inherited artificial borders and devastated economies. Colonizers left behind a legacy of division, conflict, and underdevelopment. Local industries were practically non-existent, and education and population training were not colonial priorities. Imagine a country rich in diamonds but without the capacity to process them, or an expansive oil field but no refineries to convert the oil into usable products. This was the reality faced by many post-colonial African nations. The colonial legacy is one of the primary reasons why, despite Africa's wealth and natural resources, many countries still grapple with extreme poverty today. Artificial borders and conflicts. The borders drawn by colonial powers during the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885 often divided ethnic and cultural groups, creating tensions and internal conflicts that persist to this day. At this conference, European powers divided Africa with little regard for local ethnic and cultural realities, creating arbitrary borders. These forced divisions sparked rivalries and conflicts between groups that had previously coexisted peacefully. Countries like Nigeria, Sudan, and Rwanda have experienced devastating ethnic conflicts directly linked to these colonial borders. The lack of national cohesion and continuous confrontations perpetuate poverty and insecurity, impeding economic and social development. These conflicts discourage foreign investment and hinder the building of sustainable economies. Corruption and poor governance. Endemic corruption and the mismanagement of natural resources have been significant obstacles to Africa's development. In many cases, political leaders and elites have diverted public funds and natural resources for personal enrichment, rather than investing in national development and improving living conditions for their populations. Corruption manifests in opaque contracts, bribes, and the embezzlement of funds meant for infrastructure, education, and healthcare. State capture by these elites has prevented effective policymaking and eroded public trust in institutions. As a result, the wealth generated from natural resources does not benefit the majority, perpetuating poverty and inequality. Dependence on natural resources. Why is it problematic to rely on a single resource? Dependence on one or a few resources makes economies highly vulnerable to fluctuations in international market prices. What happens when the prices of oil, minerals, or agricultural products drop? When this occurs, African economies that heavily rely on these resources suffer greatly. Government revenues decline, investments shrink, and unemployment rises. This dependence limits economic diversification and hinders the development of other critical sectors, such as manufacturing and services. Diversifying their economies by investing in infrastructure, education, and technology is key for African countries to overcome this reliance. Foreign intervention and debt. Why are many African countries trapped in debt cycles? Many have turned to loans from international financial institutions and foreign countries to finance their development. However, these loans often come with strict conditions, known as structural adjustment policies, requiring countries to implement spending cuts, privatize services, and liberalize trade. These measures limit countries' ability to invest in their own development, affecting crucial sectors like education, health, and infrastructure. Debt repayment becomes a perpetual obstacle, with much of national income going toward interest payments rather than economic and social progress. Solutions include renegotiating debt terms, canceling unsustainable debts, and implementing economic policies that prioritize sustainable development and poverty reduction. Insufficient infrastructure. Why is infrastructure so crucial for economic development? The lack of adequate infrastructure, such as roads, electricity, and clean water systems, hinders economic growth and limits business opportunities. How does the lack of roads impact development? Without proper roads, the transportation of goods and services becomes challenging and expensive, negatively affecting trade and market access. What about electricity? Without reliable electricity, industries and businesses cannot function efficiently, limiting technological advancements and complicating daily life. Investing in infrastructure is vital. Governments and international organizations must prioritize the construction and improvement of roads, power grids, and water systems to promote sustainable development and improve citizens' quality of life. Reflection. Africa's paradox of being a land of extraordinary riches yet home to widespread poverty is a stark reminder of the complexities of history, governance, and global systems. The challenges faced by African nations are deeply rooted in centuries of exploitation, but they are not insurmountable. What's clear is that solutions require a multifaceted approach. It's about empowering African nations to take control of their resources, fostering good governance, and encouraging sustainable development that prioritizes people over profits. This isn't just Africa's fight, it's a global responsibility to support fair trade, equitable policies, and the eradication of systems that perpetuate inequality. Africa's story is still being written. With its vibrant cultures, untapped potential, and the resilience of its people, the continent has the tools to redefine its future. It's up to all of us, governments, businesses, and individuals, to ensure that Africa's wealth serves its people and becomes the foundation for a brighter, more equitable future. Let's not only reflect on the challenges, but also on the incredible possibilities that lie ahead. The wealth of Africa is not just in its resources, but in its people and their capacity to shape a new destiny.